And we're on the air. Hello, friends. Welcome to Code Mentor Office Hours for today. My name is Mark. We're really excited to continue our JavaScript framework series today with another JavaScript intensive session. And we're so lucky today to have Uri Goldshtein with us, who is the creator of Angular Meteor. So I'll give Yuri a brief introduction, and then I'm going to kick it over to him for a presentation. But this entire time, if you haven't been in one of these sessions before, please feel free to use the group chat if you're in this room with any questions, or if you're watching the other live stream not in this room, use the Q&A app, and I'll be checking both the whole time, and Yuri will try to hit as many questions as we can when he wraps up. But without further ado, Yuri is the creator of the Angular Meteor package, which makes the integration between AngularJS and Meteor as seamless as possible. Yuri travels around the world building stuff and consulting to various companies. He started with Assembler, then C++, then C#, and WPF before taking on the web a few years ago. Since then, he's regularly spoken and lectured about AngularJS until he moved on to develop the library Angular Meteor. And now he's talking about Angular Meteor every chance he gets. He's joining us today from Israel, and please welcome Yuri.
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Mark, and thanks for having me. And I'm really excited, as usual. So thank you so much. I'm going to start maybe with just talking about Angular Meteor and why I did that and what we actually done, and then maybe get to questions. By the way, where can I see the questions, or I should just follow you and you will tell me the questions?
You'll be able to see ones that are chatted in. The Q&A app you might not be able to see. That's from the other room. So I'll sort of represent as many questions as I can, but you can.
Okay. Just in the chat overview. Okay, great. Okay, so I'll just screen share. So I'll show you my screen. Tell me when you see and everything is okay.
I can see it.
Okay, great. So, well, I started Angular Meteor, I guess, more than 6 months ago, and it was because I was just very frustrated with the backends I had before. I tried all kinds of stuff. Maybe I'll start with here, but I tried Ruby on Rails. I tried PHP, and I came from a .NET background, so I was used to have the full framework support with the tools and everything. And when I left started working with the web, I was missing that. I mean, I had a lot of freedom, and I obviously never went back to .NET, but still there was stuff that were missing. And when I started using Angular, I felt really good. Suddenly everything became so fast, and stuff just worked great, and it made everything was very logical, and it was very similar for me. It was very similar to WPF in .NET, and I felt comfortable, and stuff became quick. But the backend wasn't the same. I felt like everything is too slow, and I guess I started going into the direction that most Angular developers go, that are more about making the client side bigger. So I'll talk more about that in a second. So just I want to thank all the community until now. We have big community is growing really, really big. It's before the ngconf and after the ngconf talk. Then I'm really, really excited, and it shows that my need was also other people's needs. So I'm happy that I answered people's needs, and I think I will talk about that need more now. Now, just I guess usually I just have a few 4 points that I want to make every time I want people to understand, and in this time I will make it 5 points. But the first point is that you can write now AngularJS application with Meteor, and that's really important. People say that Meteor is very closed platform, and after working with that for a while now, I think it's the opposite. If you really study the platform, you can see you can do almost everything, and it's open source. You can just take and change stuff if you want. But even if you just use it's all built like on top of packages, so you can just replace packages and do whatever you want. The second thing is that I try to build AngularJS to make people be able to use everything they already have. Like they have existing applications, if they use existing third-party libraries, I want them to be able to do that. The third point, which is very important and also shows a lot about Meteor, is that Angular works like natively on Meteor. So, and I'll show that, I haven't showed it on the ngConf because I haven't had time, but I'll show it now. I'll show how we did that, how we're syncing the data with Meteor, and we're basically doing the same thing as Blaze, that this is Meteor's front-end framework. We're doing exactly the same thing. So there's not a patch or there's not like a performance issues in the synchronization. Every bottleneck or something that you will have is not because of the connection. It's just like the global limits of those frameworks. And the fourth thing, I think, well, the fourth and the fifth points, I guess, are here is the four for Angular developers that I think they really should check out Meteor. And the fifth, because I was really enjoying by it, and I think Angular developers will really appreciate that framework. And the fifth point is, I think this is for Meteor developers. I think this connection is really good for Meteor. I think opening Meteor to more opinions helps the framework, and I can see now that Meteor is doing that. Meteor is now, after they released like their 1.0 version, they're like, and everything works, and they have this package like that, just package of packages that like just works. Now people are starting to play with it and show more opinions, and I can see like that Meteor is getting like more open and like seeing the possibilities that happen in those years in the JavaScript world and how to integrate with them. So I talked before about the other solutions. I think the last solution that I used was Happy.js. It's a really good framework from Node.js, but I prefer it on Express. I think it's much better than Express.js, but I came from .NET, and I was missing that also Happy and also Express do very particular thing. And I know it's important to people in the JavaScript world to have just one thing that do just one specific thing, and it's the best in the world in that, and just don't care about anything around it, and should be totally open to everything and not opinionated in any way. But I think that AngularJS is actually good because it's very, very opinionated, and I think it's good because it takes a certain way and it says this is how we do it, and then stuff are easier. And I think Meteor is that way, is the best framework that I encountered that does the same in the JavaScript, in Node.js world. And because it does that, it gives me much more security when I'm working with the framework. Like, stuff are happening fast. I know what's the best practice to do something. I think maybe it's even a little bit like Rails, but much better. Like, I think like Rails gave people like a way to do stuff, and if you do the stuff this way, it works great. And I think Meteor is the same, but it's still more open, and it's still on Node, and it's just like a generation ahead of Rails, so it has much more possibilities than Rails. And right now I'm thinking about writing a blog post about comparing Meteor and Min.js, which is probably something that everyone found about. And my particular opinion is that the Min.js promise was to get front-end developers use back-end code because it's simple enough to do. And I think this is a little bit of a broken promise. I think it's okay to start, but once you get into more logic, then it's getting harder. And I think Meteor like deliver that promise, and I want to write more about that. So just an example of what we did. This is like this first line here is the simplest API that you can do to just start working with Angular Meteor. And if you're an AngularJS developer, that's the only thing you need to change in your code, and this will replace your HTTP service or your REST Angular service or your Firebase service. And actually, I take a lot of ideas from the Firebase service, because I think they've done a great job integrating into Angular. So I want to see that I want to do at least as good a job as they did integrating with Angular. And this specific, and I'll talk more and I'll show more code this time because I have more time. But because we integrate it as a service, as a $Meteor service, then you can just inject it in your application, and everything else is becoming really easy. And you don't need to change anything else. You can work still with Bootstrap and UI Bootstrap, and you can work with UI Router and with your existing applications and your existing third-party libraries, whatever they are. And we used a little bit of like even famous Angular, and it worked great. And we use a lot of Ionic. We love Ionic, so I think people will be excited about that. And I'll talk a little bit about Meteor for the AngularJS developers out there. So Meteor is an open source platform, so which is a big difference. Like there's a lot of the JavaScript backend world is getting really busy, which is great. It's very exciting. I feel like it's a little bit like 2 or 3 years ago, where there's starting to be like tons of front-end frameworks, and there were tons to choose from, and people were complaining about that. But I think it's great. Like a lot of good stuff happened. Like first of all, AngularJS, which is amazing, and now there's more solutions that are also very, very exciting. And because of all the time that passes, there's Angular 2.0, which is very exciting as well. And I think the same is happening on the backend. So I think the most important thing to look at is front-end developers should start look at backend and should start feeling more comfortable looking into that. There's a lot of exciting stuff are happening, and I think Meteor is the most exciting thing. But a lot of those stuff that are happening on the backend we can categorize them as one is like services, like that you can pay and they take care of everything for you, and that's really good. But I'm just an open source guy, and I like all my platform to be open source, and I like to use everything, and I like to have the power to contribute and to know what's happening. And I'll also, because I work a lot I used to work a lot as a consultant for enterprise companies, then I know that they are searching a lot for a solution that they can install on their own servers. So Meteor is an open source platform. And I look at it like my infrastructure team. Like if I would have had a team that helps me, if I worked at Gmail, I always give that example, that if I worked at Gmail, then I would use Meteor. Is exactly the same. So Meteor gives me takes care of everything about communication for me, and it takes care of, first of all, it takes care of real-time communication. And with real-time communication, there's a lot of problems. What happens if the network is slow, and sometimes it's on, sometimes it's off, and I want to do updates instantly. I don't want to wait for that. And in large applications like Gmail, Facebook, and those big teams, then they use an architecture that, for me as a .NET developer, makes a lot of sense. It uses, you have a local database that you work with. Everything is saved into there, and then your infrastructure takes care of syncing that with the backend. And somehow, AngularJS developers, um, somehow AngularJS developers don't do that. And I didn't do it as well because I haven't had a good solution to do that. And I didn't have like 100 guys working with me, 100 people working with me on my projects. So I just like blotted my front-end code with a lot of stuff and then just did $HTTP or used REST Angular to sync my data. Or later on with real-time data, I use Socket.io. But I didn't have that infrastructure. And then when I saw Meteor, it took me a while to understand it. But then when I started using Angular Meteor, I understood it better because I seen how the architecture works, and I understood. I said, oh, that's how Meteor works. It's the infrastructure I wanted. It's the type of architecture that I needed, but I don't need to pay. I don't need to start integrating with all kinds of like local database solutions and decide what's best. They did that for me. So that's their goal, I think. I think Meteor's goal is like giving you can write a Gmail or Facebook's quality apps, but with that architecture, but you don't need the money. It's all open source, and Meteor's team itself take care of the core components like they were your infrastructure team, and I think it's great. And by the way, now I see more and more, we can see more and more companies that go into that type of architecture. Meteor's real-time data synchronization protocol, it's called DDP, and there's a lot of resources about that on the web, is actually an open source protocol. And because there's not a lot of, there's no equivalent to REST protocol, which is very good and very simple for push and update updates, then for real time. So Meteor just created a DDP protocol. Now more and more, and open sourced it, and now more and more people use it. So and there's implementations for that for iOS or for Go or for I think maybe Ruby even, I don't know. So you can actually work with that protocol and just gradually move into Meteor architecture. And a good solution that like shows how Meteor is radically simpler is Trello, and I showed that on the ngConf. There's a leaderboard. You can Google it. It's a Trello replica that is open source. It's developed by 2 developers in 2 countries in 2 months, and it works great. Like you should really try it out, and you can look at the code, and everything is open, and you can see it works exactly like Trello, and it's amazing. It's an amazing project. I think now they need to change the UI because it's too simple. So it's similar to Trello, but as a example that shows how powerful Meteor is, I think it's a very strong example. Also, Meteor is like growing super fast. Since the first time I looked at Meteor, it really changed. Like there's like over 150 meetups all over the world, which is very exciting for me because I'm traveling all over the world, so I can talk in a lot of places and people can host me. There's a lot of community packages. So when people say Meteor doesn't support X, it's usually wrong, because usually you can find a community package that does support it, and the community is huge. So anything that it's just like any other ecosystem. Anything that the core development team doesn't support doesn't mean it's not there. The community is really, really strong and really exciting, and there's a lot of really strong people in the community, and Angular Meteor is part of it. People could say Meteor doesn't support Angular, but it's not true anymore. So the same for other stuff. And yeah, in GitHub, it's getting huge. It's going to pass Rails, which is amazing. So in growth and in power, I think Meteor is getting super strong. And my goal is not make Angular developers like left behind. Like it's now, I think it's a great point for front-end developers to start looking into a little bit on the backend, and I think Meteor is like their best way of going into that. I will code later, but first I want to, maybe with the questions, but I want to talk more about what we actually did. So the first thing we did is the real-time data service. So that you can, what you actually can do right now is you have a collection, you have that data that exists on the server, and the only thing you need to do to bind it into your scope is this first line here. It's just meteor.collection, call that service, and bind it into the parties. Parties on the right are the object that are the Meteor object, in just like a plain Meteor object, and parties on the left are a plain Angular object, and that's one line is the only thing you need to do to sync the data. And it means that it will auto-bind, like instantly. Every change you will do to each one of them will reflect instantly. But sometimes you wouldn't want to do that all the time. You wouldn't want to watch over the Angular part, but you want to explicitly update the client and just let the client just listen all the time to the reactive changes from Meteor, and just push the updates from the client explicitly. So you can look at the bottom that you can actually cancel that auto-bind of the Angular part and just like explicitly save new parties or change the parties in any way you want and just save everything at once. And then you get a promise that you get if there was an error, let's say if you haven't had permissions to do it, you will get an error, or you will get the actual change that happened and the confirmation. Also, there's one of the great things I just saw recently a lot of talk about OAuth and auth in general and how to do it. So Meteor is great in that, and so we also supported that in a very easy way. We didn't have to do a lot. Like we have the user, once you're logged in, we have the user exist anywhere. You can just access the user. You can see what permissions he has very easily. It exists on the root scope if you want, or as a service if you want, and it's really, really easy. You can also use a user promise, which means that when you, let's say if you have routes in UI router or whatever router you use, you can use a promise to make sure that the user has permissions to that, and then also go into that route just when the user logged in. After he logs in, you can wait until the login happens. And also you have services that you can just call Meteor.login with password, Meteor.login with Facebook, Meteor.login with Twitter, which makes login super simple. But also, you can just, Meteor provides a UI for you, so you can, even if you don't want to do your custom forms, Meteor gives you like a default forms that you can work on, and we showed that on the tutorial. You can just like edit with one command line, and you have everything you need to auth. So I never saw something that simple in auth, and I did a project like in Angular back then, and it's a friend's project, and I helped him, that's called ng Secure, because we had enough of like doing the same thing in auth in Angular, the same again and again, and now I feel like finally it's solved. So it's very exciting for me.
Hey, Yuri, can I just interrupt for 1 second with a question?
Yes, of course.
Yeah, so Shaitan just had a question on that last piece. He was just curious, is it going to keep on pulling, or is there a push mechanism from the server side? And also, what are parties? I think you mentioned.
Yeah. So I think first of all, wait, I'll share the screen again, and I'll, instead of going to the code part in the slides, maybe I'll go just straight to the tutorial. We have. I've built like, if you can see my screen, there's a really long tutorial that goes through all the steps to build like a full app. And there's videos of me talking and mumbling about that, and you can see the code diff and everything. So when I talk about that, I'll go here. So we don't. We are watching over. There's a Meteor takes care of watching of the data and syncing it with the client, and if and I'll go to that in a second, but this mechanism doesn't. We try not to interfere with that. So because how can I explain it? Okay, I'll start with the simpler. So when we do that, what's actually happening? Maybe I'll make it a little bit bigger. Yeah. Okay. So when we do that sync, this one line, we need to watch two types of changes. One is the Meteor changes, which means Meteor watches over that parties collection, which is registered just here. Now, this is just, it happens on a plain JavaScript file that exists on the root of the project. So any JavaScript file that you don't put it on in Meteor, you don't put it on the client folder or the server folder, it means that it exists also on the server and also on the client. This is a very interesting thing that Meteor gives you. It has like a build process that actually copies your code and distributes it also to the client, whether it's Cordova, where there is mobile, or where it's web, and to the server. So basically, this line here registers a JavaScript object that lives everywhere. Now, because Meteor gives you the mini Mongo, which is the Mongo API on the client, then every action that you will do on those parties, you can do it on the client and on the server, and it will be exactly the same syntax if you use the Mongo API syntax. And Meteor will watch over the database to see those changes. And I'll try to go into that a little bit. I'm afraid a little bit of the time, but I'll go into that a little bit. So I talked before on the DDP protocol, and the DDP protocol is very, very easy. Just it's a combination of like it's a little bit similar to the object of observe API, if anyone knows. So it watches a collection and it gives you an API that says basically changed at, updated at, insert at. So very simple API that gives you like a log of everything that happened, and then you can react into those changes. So what we are doing right now here is just that we're watching over this API, and just like Blaze, we're updating just the updates just according to the updates that we get from Meteor. So we get a changed at a particular party, and we just update that scope parties in this particular place. We get remove that at a particular party and remove just that particular party. And when we do that here, then this is just one part. The second part is we need to watch over the scope parties, and we do that with a, let's say, a modified watch of Angular. And maybe I'll show the code, and it will be even more easier. I'll go through, and it's also good for people to look at it. I'll do it really fast. So sorry if I'm doing it too fast. Maybe I'll put it here. It's nicer colors. So, so I hope you can see the code, but what we are actually doing, it's just a small snippet, and later you can dig on harder, but we're watching over our ng collection. When we did a new collection, we actually created an ng collection that holds those parties, and we're watching over it. Now, we're doing all kinds of stuff here to make the watch more fast, because usually when you watch over, you do a watch over a large collection in Angular, it gets not as performant. So we do all kinds of tricks here to make it faster. I won't go into that. But then when that collection, we understood that there was a change on the Angular side, then we put it into this function, that this is a diff-array function, and it gives us basically the same API as Meteors gives us. Like, we changed it, removed it, and added it, but on the other direction from Angular. And then we can update from Angular to Meteor from the client to the server automatically. Like, you don't need to do anything because we're watching over it. But what I said in the slide, and this is a long slide here, is that when we're giving a false here, when we're sending false, we're just canceling the watch. So we're not watching over the scope parties anymore. We still are watching over the Meteor's changes, which I can show in a second how we do that, but we're canceling actually the watch. So it's even more performant if you use really big chunks of data, and also if you just don't need that watching anymore. And it actually makes Angular 1 Meteor works much more similar to Angular 2.0, because Angular 2.0 has only one-way data binding, not two-way data binding. But then when you do that, if you do want to update from the client, you just explicitly do it. Like, let's say if you click on a button, on a save button, you would call save. And then you can, we have like a API reference where you can look and you can see that, like, what are all those functions. Like, there's a save function, and you can, if you don't send anything, it saves all the collection. If you send an object, it will save that particular object. If it's a new object, it will add it. It's a very, very simple API. So I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, I think that was great. You can proceed with the presentation. Sorry for interrupting.
No, that's good. That's good. I think it's good. So if you're already here, I would like to show. This is one part. This is how we're updating from the Angular to the Meteor side. But I want to show you again, just as a snippet, the code where we updating the Angular side from Meteor. So when we are sending, sorry for jumping back and forth, but on this line, we're sending here Meteor.collection parties. Parties are, as we saw, parties are Mongo collection, Meteor's Mongo collection. It's an object that Meteor gives us. But Mongo collection actually exists, and this is a Meteor's thing. Mongo collection actually holds a cursor, and a Mongo cursor. And why is it different? Because this cursor in Meteor is reactive. Meteor watches over Mongo. So when you, and a cursor, let's say, means like, I want to not get all the collection, but I want to get just the first 5 results. Or I want to get the first 5 results sorted by first name. And Meteor watches over that cursor, so it means that it will update only those 5 objects, and it will return those objects sorted by something. So we actually extract that cursor from the parties, and we observe it. And again, it's a very simple API, because this is the API that actually reflects the DDP protocol, and you can see that we get, when we watch over that cursor, we get a very simple event. We get added at, changed at, moved at, and removed at, and then we're just updating our Angular array just based out of that. Now, if you want to read more about Mongo Cursor, I would suggest going to the Meteor Docs website, which is very, very interesting to read. And the API is really simple, and I think this is a very interesting thing, that Meteor lets you watch over a cursor and not just like this huge collection. So it's really important. And I think you can, like, if you want to see more of that, I think you can look at our API, but I think we also, I think the best way to look at it is we have in step 12, we have our, in the tutorial, we have search, sort, pagination, and reactive vars. This is a very, very important chapter that I think everyone should look at, because I think here is the best example of why Meteor and Angular are so powerful together, and you can really understand why having a cursor, a watched cursor, is so powerful. So I would really suggest looking into that. I'll go a little bit about what we want to do next. Our biggest step for Angular Meteor 1 is actually better test support. I mean, we test everything internally all the time, but we want to give best practice for people how to test their apps. Like, you can test your Angular apps the best way you can, and you can best test your Meteor part the best way you can, but we're trying to figure out what's the best practice to test both of them together. And when we'll finish doing that, we'll release 1.0. I think the API is already solid. And we're looking into Angular 2.0, which is actually, it's very, very exciting. Because we're seeing that Angular is going in the same, a little bit, I think, in the same way that React goes and Blaze goes, which means they're going into one, they still have different stuff, but they're going into one-way data binding, and they're losing their scope data, which means the data that you're working with is just the Meteor's data, or whatever other data you want to use in Angular 2.0, like Firebase data. And it makes the syncing, what the job we're doing, much easier, and it makes everything more performant. And it also fits more naturally into the Meteor stack. And this is very exciting, because it looks like this type of architecture that I talked before is actually embraced by the Angular team as well. So, and actually what we're doing in Angular Meteor is making Angular 1.0 behave a little bit like Angular 2.0, because when we're watching over, and I'll show that very quickly on the code, when I go back here, and when we're watching over the Angular array, we're actually just here to get what's added, and then we're reverting the change. And we will later get that change from the meaning of Mongo, from Meteor. But it makes the one source of truth, not the scope data, but the local database. And this is something that, this philosophy is much more similar to Angular 2.0 than Angular 1.0. So we're already doing that here. So I think using Angular Meteor gives you a little bit of the philosophy already of Angular 2.0 in a way. A very, very exciting thing that actually not I'm doing, but one of my teammates are doing, is working on putting AngularJS on the server side, and it actually works, which is pretty amazing. And it means basically, and there's a branch on our repository that shows how to work with it, and also his code of doing that. And you can, it basically means that you can like define a service, an AngularJS service, and use it everywhere. You can use it on your server-side code, you can use it on your client-side code, and even sync the data of that service everywhere. And it's a very broad thing, but it's very, very exciting, and it works. So I guess in the recent month or so, we'll talk about it even more. But in the meantime, you can just check out this branch on our repository, and it's very, very exciting. And yeah, and I'm gonna release more stuff about like the philosophies, the similarities between Angular and Meteor, and what we learn from each other. And I'm definitely not doing it by myself. We have a great team that works with me. Everyone's freelancers and really, really, really smart guys. And the community is really great. Like if you would look at the quality of pull requests we get, it's pretty amazing. Like it's really, really good. To start Angular Meteor and not listening to me mumbling, you can just go to the tutorial, go to the website. In the website, there's tutorial, there's API reference I showed you before. If there's a problem there, you can very easily just change it. There's a button, you can click on it, you can fix my typos and even tell me that I'm doing stuff wrong. And it's very important because the tutorial is a way to show what's the best practice of doing an app, and I would love people to give me feedback about that. And before I dive, there's more stuff that I'm doing, but I think it's a good time to handle questions, so I would know that I still have time for questions and what people want to know. So, yeah.
Totally. Yeah, if anyone has any questions at this point, please throw them into the chat. Let me check the Q&A from the other room. I can get us rolling with a couple questions if you'd like to do some now, and then maybe you can keep going if there's some time. You know, some questions that were emailed in. I think I mentioned this to you, Yuri, but, you know, a lot of people are at the onset of starting a big new project, and you know, maybe Angular Meteor is on their radar, and you know, what do you think what are the variables they should look for to decide if that's the right fit for their project?
So I think that, first of all, if you're an AngularJS developer, then definitely I will start gradually. Like you can like throw away everything and just start with Blaze and Meteor. And actually, Blaze is a really good framework. Like I would urge people, even though I'm an Angular developer and I wrote Angular Meteor, I will urge people just to try it, just to get the feeling of it. And I think they've done a lot of smart stuff there that Angular 2.0 is going to introduce. And it's very interesting. So I would look into that anyway. But if you have a team and everyone knows Angular already, then I would definitely try Meteor. If you have existing code and libraries that you've done, I would definitely try Angular Meteor with Meteor. About existing applications, I think that we worked hard to make it possible. So it means like you will. It depends on how strong you have your server-side team. I think if you are a front-end developer and you're searching for a back-end framework, you should definitely try Meteor. I think if you're a Rails developer, I think you should definitely try Meteor. I think there's a lot of I see a lot of Rails developers that understand there's something new, like that they used to work with Rails that gives them like really good ecosystem, really great best practices, and they want to move into Node for a while now, and they just haven't felt like they had the support they needed, and they have this one framework that give them like comfort, like, you know, one thing to do something, and I think Meteor is that. Yeah, and this is, yeah, I hope I answered the question.
Yeah, that sounds good. Shaitan wrote in, does Meteor only work with MongoDB? I guess because that was the example you were giving.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, right now Meteor, the team itself supports MongoDB and Redis, but it's important to know and this is because MongoDB was like the best choice and the most broader one to start with. But it's important to understand that Meteor is more of an architecture and a platform than a solution, than a specific solution that works with one database. So that architecture that I talked about with the mini Mongo and the Mongo is actually, there's a lot of people who replicate it with other databases. So there's actually, people ask me a lot about RethinkDB, and there was one guy from the community that built himself like a mini RethinkDB and a RethinkDB, and it just, I think he's not supporting that anymore, but I saw in their blog that they're going to do something about it on RethinkDB's blog. But I think the most important thing to understand, and it's Angular Meteor is the best example. Meteor is a platform and an architecture, and you can actually do everything you want with it. I think for the roadmap, the next thing Meteor is going to support is an SQL database. My guess is probably Postgres, because there's a lot of Rails developers that wants that support. And again, it shouldn't be like, it's not easy, but it shouldn't be so hard because Meteor is built in a way that the architecture works like that. You will build like a live query tier on top of a Postgres that will handle watching over Postgres, and Postgres is actually a very good database, so and it's very easy to walk on top of it to get the changes. And building some kind of an API replica on the client side, and I think there's probably existing solutions for that already, and then just syncing them with the DDP open source protocol. So yeah, I think there's community stuff that are already working on that, but Meteor itself going to support that in the future. But right now, the best supported database is MongoDB, definitely.
Cool. Also, a follow-up question on that one. Is it going to hang the application if I have too many cursors listening for the changes?
So it depends on your. If you have a lot of cursors, it depends on your. Well, it depends on a lot of stuff. Like first of all, you have that problem on the server. So depends if this is like making a lot of, and it depends on also how much data you have. Like it depends on a lot of stuff. But I would, but I will. Let's start with the client side, because I wrote the Angular Meteor on the client side, and so watching over the on the client side is very cheap. Exactly the thing that costs the most is watching over the Angular side, and then let's say if you have a lot of, and I would say it's not about the amount of Angular arrays that you have, it's about their size, because Angular and how deep they are, because Angular Watch is pretty expensive, and the longer your let's say the longer your list, your Angular array is, and the deeper it is, then the performance there are going to reduce. So the easiest solution is to just not watch the Angular array, which is just like I showed before. You just send the flag, not watch it, and then all the updates you do explicitly. So this is one thing. The second thing is that you can actually paginate, like, and I showed it on the tutorial on step 12. Usually people get to AngularJS, when people say, there's a lot of people saying AngularJS is slow. And this is a very big statement, But usually I think this is because people clutter their client side with tons of code and tons of data. But when you have a very simple server-side code, then it's very easy for you to do pagination. And then you can live with 30 objects on the client side and not 3,000. There's no reason you will have, usually there's no reason for you to have 3,000 objects on the client side, and then Angular handles that without a problem. So I think step 12 is a really good example of why, in most cases, you shouldn't even get to that point where you call that flag. But that flag is always there for you to handle.
Cool. I was curious, can you talk about any projects that you know of that have successfully implemented Angular Meteor?
Yeah, so because we just started this I guess 8 months ago, we actually Angular Meteor wasn't started as an Angular Meteor project. We had our own project that we were working on, and it's a project for hospitals, and it's now on the way, so I can't show it so much already. But it's a system for scheduling interviews with doctors. And it works across the web and mobile. And before that, we built that with Rails and with native iOS. And we just migrated everything for Meteor, and we said, oh, but we have so much great code with Angular, let's just try to work with them together. And this is how Angular Meteor happened. So Angular Meteor is actually built on top of a project. So this is our first project. Since then, we had 3 other projects. I know I was contacted at least by 7 dev shops that work now primarily with Angular Meteor. Some of them actually works with famous Angular Meteor, and some more with more standard solution like Angular Meteor and then Bootstrap and Ionic. And yeah, this is actually a good question. I think I need to start I get emails every day from people doing that, but I think I just need to start, I don't know, maybe a page for people to publish their project. So I'll do that definitely.
But that's for 8 months out. That's pretty amazing. You have all those people using it. So yeah, that's all the questions I've collected so far. If you'd like to take a few more minutes to show anything else you think people would really find interesting, we can definitely go for a few more minutes.
So just me just showing stuff.
Well, yeah, you mentioned that there was one more piece you were thinking of showing. Yeah, if you'd like, yeah.
So I need to share my screen again. Wait just a second. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about more of the stuff that we were doing. Most of them, I guess, are in the tutorial, and I really urge people to go there. There's a lot of stuff that we show there, and best practices and everything. But so I talked about the Meteor collection, but we also do the same with the Meteor object. So we can take a specific object by ID, and I'll open in another tab the chapter that shows how to do that. But you can see here, that you can just call Meteor object, and again, it's an object of the parties, but you send an ID, and from that point on, you can watch over that object and just change it on the fly. But again, you can like with the collection, you can send a flag, and then it works just like update explicitly. So if you have a form, like a classic form with save and cancel button, so you can just send here, you send a flag, and then you can just, you're not watching over the Angular changes, just on the Meteor changes, and then you can explicitly call save. And also, I've added a function that's called receipt, that is actually just receipts the client-side party from the server, and it will just receipt your form. So it makes working with forms very easy. Another important thing is that very important concept in Meteor is methods. And this is another part of the DDP protocol. You can call methods that can run both on the client and both on the server. And what does it actually mean? It means that it will first, the logic will run on the client, and everything will update instantly. But then, let's say if you don't have permissions for that, then it will get to the server where everything is secure, and it will handle and it will do the same action, and this action will be canceled because let's say you don't have permissions, or maybe the server has more data than the client, and then it will run on the server and revert back the changes if there was changes. And this is what you can call latency compensation, which is really, really strong and powerful concept. So to call Meteor functions like that, the only thing you need to do is meteor.call. And again, we have a tutorial on it on step 14 that you can, I'm showing there how to invite and send emails and all kinds of stuff like that, and it's really, really simple. By the way, this Meteor methods concept is, I think, when AngularJS developers starting working with that, it's the first time they're thinking, oh wait, like I put all this logic on the client side, maybe it's not the best place. Like it's the first time people are saying like, oh, we do, like by default we do everything on the client side, and then it's like you can actually feel why there's stuff that are better that they sit on the server side and not on the client side. So I think it's a very powerful concept for Angular developers to work with. Another very important thing I want to talk about is Meteor include directive. So there's a lot of Blaze, which is the Meteor's front-end framework. They have a lot of prepared templates and that are in the community. There's a huge community around it, and we thought, why not just use it? So you can actually, with an Angular directive that's called Meteor include, you can just in the source specify the name of the template, and you can use it inside Angular. So you don't need to choose, like, you can use templates from Blaze, which is very, very powerful as well. Another thing that is very, very important to show is a Meteor camera. So why is that interesting? Because Meteor's camera package shows you that you can, you can take a picture, and I showed it on the ngconf a bit with the example. You can take the same API and use it to get a picture on your laptop and get a picture on your mobile phone. And this is because of Meteor's build system that gives you that power, and it's a very, very exciting thing. So it's just like a small example, but very cool example of why Meteor is so powerful, why one framework that gives you the best practice over all the platforms is very, very powerful. Yeah, I think, and all the other stuff here are, we just try to make everything that you need on Meteor as an Angular service. And we built, when we thought about the API, we thought first about how it will be like the most natural for Angular developers, but also making it similar to the Meteor's API. So as an Angular developer, by working with Angular Meteor, you will already be comfortable with Meteor. You will already learn new concepts, and taking on Meteor will be easier. So it will be like an easier learning process, and not just like making everything the Angular way. We like combined both philosophies, I think. So yeah, that's the most important things. Another really important thing, sorry, is the get reactively variable that I won't talk about it right now, but I think you should really, really try the step 12 and look into that, because it shows how powerful are those two frameworks together, and how can you actually make, what's the difference between reactivity and two-way data binding, and how you can work with them together. And get reactively is a big part of that. I will just urge you to look into that more.
Awesome. Well, Yuri, thank you so much. That was really comprehensive and fantastic. Hopefully everybody got a lot out of that, and we definitely recommend checking out the documentation at AngularJS.meteor.com. And as I said at the beginning, this is all going to be on the Code Mentor YouTube channel as soon as this is over. So, for any of you where this was very new information, go back and rewatch, Yuri's explanation of it. One last question just came in. Is it possible for you to share the hospital application link you are developing? Oh, good question. Are you able to post that?
Yeah. Should I post it here on the chat?
Yeah, that'd be great. And then I'll also include it in sort of an email follow up to all the people who are RSVP.
The name is Third Friday, but I'll send you the link to the mobile applications and to the site. Yeah, sure. Why not?
That'd be great. Yeah, and Yuri, where else can people follow what you're up to and keep tabs on the latest with Angular Meteor?
So the best place is the Angular Meteor website, and actually the best place is the GitHub. Is our GitHub. There's a link from our website, but you can just Google Angular Meteor, and most of the results will lead you to Angular Meteor. And just follow the repo. Like I have also a Twitter handle, but I just started using it, so I'm new into Twitter. But so you can check out that as well. But I think the GitHub is the best place. Let's start the repo. We'll have a lot of stars, and we'll feel great with ourselves. And yeah, that's the best place to check
awesome.
out.
Yeah, and obviously, if anyone has any difficulty on any Angular projects, there's tons of Angular experts on Code Mentor, obviously, so we're always at your disposal. And yeah, with that, I think I'll say thanks and we'll sign on off. But thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. We have a bunch more excellent office hours coming up, so check out Code Mentor's office hours list for more really amazing JavaScript experts like this. So thank you so much, Yuri, for the time, and take care, everyone.
Right. Thank you.